folks, and welcome to another post-game edition of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast in existence to give you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and presented by the best pizza. That is Pie Pizza. You can find the online episode show notes below, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app and or platform you choose to listen to this show on in this special Disguised Coverage. Special for two reasons. One, because it's post-game edition of Disguised Coverage. Two, because I am joined by Mr. Greg Tompsett of the Buffalo Show, close personal friend. I was going to try and make another joke, but my brain is spinning with all the notes and post-game things, so I got nothing. Greg, welcome to the show. Thank you for being
here. Good evening. This is weird. I'm not used to coming on.
I don't know what to do with my
hand. I don't know how this works. No, this is awesome. Hey, we watched a football game today, and nobody got hurt playing that football game. This is great. I take that back.
Dude for the Bears got hurt.
Yes, there's actually a couple injuries for the Bears and Balin Spector, I believe.
That's true. Yeah,
did get dinged up.
Yeah, weird.
Hammy, they said.
Yeah, and I didn't know if it was gonna be something worse. And I heard Tasker go ooh, and then I saw him limp, and I immediately pulled my eyes away because I don't want to see. Yeah. I haven't looked at a game injury since Willis McGahee's knee exploded in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State. Oh no, I lied. And then years later, when YouTube became a thing, I looked up the Joe Theismann leg break, and that was the last thing I've ever seen.
That's a terrible idea. That was a terrible idea.
I was a messed up child.
Terrible idea.
Darkness for me.
That really bad idea.
I remember the YouTube became a thing, and I used it to look up that, and I think a trailer for the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was a weird time. I don't know.
I can't explain a lot. I
did a lot of peyote as a 12-year-old, but each their own. And we're all here. This is a good time. And Greg, what's nice about this post-game episode is it's not as extreme from an emotional standpoint as the Bills-Steelers game was last week, where you had a lot of people on the one side of it's the preseason, it doesn't matter. A lot of people on the other side of the season's done, jettison everyone into the sun. But here we are after a nice settling performance from the Bills team as a whole, but especially the starters. And it allows us to really be able to dive into things and get into the weeds, especially with everybody in the live chat from a, I think, less than emotional perspective, more analytical. And Greg, in this episode, we're going to dive into obviously the Bills and Bears, but into a bit of the go forward for this team in terms of what we'd like to see them do now that the dust is kind of settled a bit on the Bills preseason now that it's over.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And obviously, the funny part is both games probably matter about the same. It isn't amazing when we win a preseason game. It isn't horrible when we lose. I will say last week there was enough sloppiness and lack of discipline that although I disagreed, I would not have played the starters. I grasped the idea of hey, let's not end on that note. Show me you guys have everything ready and let's go into the season feeling good. So opening up with 3-and-out touchdown drive, 3-and-out, everybody sit down, I'm good. At least from that standpoint, it was still more risk than I wanted to see because it was still 16 plays more than were necessary to expose any of our valuable players to. But in the grand scheme of things, now that we got past that without any injuries occurring, I can appreciate the strategy of it in the sense of, hey, let's not end the way that we did last time. Let's go out and show that, hey, we're ready. We're moving forward. So I can at least appreciate that. And now in hindsight, I'm good.
Yeah, in hindsight, the approach was perfect. So huge kudos to Sean McDermott.
Brilliance. Pure brilliance.
Such tremendous foresight from him and analysis. But no, I think that's the catch-22 of it and the double-edged sword. You want everyone to leave the preseason feeling like they're in rhythm, feeling confident. You want to feel good about both sides of the ball, but at the same time, you want your starters protected. Not even just your starters. You really want everyone protected in every way, shape, or form. The whole, wrap everyone in bubble wrap, especially the starters, take them off. And so it was nice to see, again, aside from Spector, that really nobody picking up any big knocks for the Bills, especially from a starter's perspective, and allowed us to get into a position where now we feel better about their performance. Again, maybe you don't feel as great depending on how you feel about the Chicago Bears, but you get a nice, solid performance from the starters and kind of ride off into the preseason sunset to start into the regular season. Good rhythm, good vibes, and as healthy pretty much as you can be for the most part and for the majority. Greg, You were the guest. So, do you want to start with your takeaways from this game on the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball? Dealer's choice. Well, no, I'm the dealer, so technically it's your choice.
Player's choice.
Yeah, player's choice. Greg's choice.
So I was like, what's the opposite of dealer? Let's start on offense. And I'll start with my first one, which was, I think the offensive line looked solid today. I don't know that our outcome for offensive line is going to be amazing at any point, because I don't think we have an amazing offensive line. So last week was, obviously concerning, although, I think you and Eric and others discussed some of the things of like, hey, we did an awful lot of like isolated 7-step drops that we may not see during the year. So maybe they were kind of evaluating some things we may not see all that much of. I think today was a little more normal, more mix of the run, more 12 personnel with, thank God, Dawson Knox bolted on next to Spencer Brown. And I think it looked better. It wasn't perfect. Josh got flushed a couple times, but at minimum, it was good. And we actually saw a little more movement there with David Edwards stepping in for Connor McGovern. I know he had, one rough, spot there at one point, but overall, I think as a starting caliber guard, I think we have multiple starting caliber guards. It was interesting that Edwards came in to play for instead of Bates as the first guy in, but I think that speaks to the depth that we're talking about here. And ultimately, that's my first takeaway was the offensive line is fine. I think we're fine. I think reminding ourselves that Spencer Brown was also the right tackle last year when we scored the second most points per game in the NFL. So, don't get me wrong. Would I like better? Yes. But I think that people have talked themselves into, oh my God, it's going to be a disaster. And my answer is, I think today showed the offensive line is going to be fine.
I think that's a fair point. The mercurial nature of the offensive line, I think, is also tied to Spencer Brown's mercurial nature. It seems like they go hand in hand. And last week was just, it's funny. I left last week's broadcast being like, oh boy, this is super rough. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I always reserve final evaluation until I see the tape. And then I saw the tape. And to your point, I was like, okay, I feel a little better after watching the game tape. Do I feel good? No, but I feel a little better. And I felt a little better after this game as well. And I really think that conversation and the way you broached it and how we just discussed it right now, I literally think that's going to be the conversation from a week to week perspective. This Bills offensive line, I think it's a fine to good offensive line. And if Spencer Brown stabilizes, this is an offensive line that's 15th to 13th or 12th in the NFL, which is, in an ideal world, you have an amazing offensive line. You've got at least one All-Pro or a couple if you're the Eagles or the Chiefs or whoever. But you don't need this amazing offensive line with what Josh Allen can do and with the rest of the weapons that they have. You just need a high floor. You just need that semblance of consistency. You need to just reduce those dips that you get from last year. It was from Roger Saffold and Spencer Brown. This year it looks like it's more kind of isolated into the Spencer Brown bucket. But it was, I do want to see the tape as always. Anytime anything happens,
especially offensive line, people, I think anyone who doesn't put in the work that you do and Eric does don't realize how much it changes just flipping vertically and being able to see the spacing, where right now when you're looking on the angle and you can't really tell, was that passed off or did he get around the shoulder there, or was that a stunt or a loop coming back? And all you kind of see is some of the chaos that's there. When you just flip it and are able to see it vertically, it makes such a big difference, especially for, defensive backs and line play are the two that make the biggest difference, being able to see that. And I will reserve that until we can see a little bit more of the offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything with trench play and secondary play, to your point, you need that end zone angle and that as wide sideline angle as you can to really kind of put everything together. Because we always say, we don't know the calls out there. And so you're trying to grab as many breadcrumbs as you can in order to piece together what actually happened out there. So that way you can properly evaluate, and you need those camera angles to really be able to discern everything. And so I think that's a solid point. I echo your sentiments with feeling a bit better about the offensive line. Not
celebrating, not lauding it as, some all-pro, but I think when we had Brandon Thorne on, he talked about he had them in the 16 to 20 range with Spencer Brown as the question mark. So I think your rating of, hey, if he stabilizes, I think that's right, where we would go from probably slightly below average to slightly above average.
Yeah. And then I again, I would like it to be better than that, but I'll take that. There's only so many spots that you can have like B+ and A- guys. Like, it's just not feasible. And as much as I would like one of those spots to be the offensive line, to each their own, and how they build their rosters and how things go.
All the good things in time. All good things in time.
All good things in time. My first one is a bit tied to the offensive line, but not just the starters. Going throughout everybody, the run game in general, I keep finding myself like week after week, and especially after this game, like, I just like what they're doing from a run perspective, like the physicality, the holes that are continued to open up, the success we've seen for James Cook with regularity. We saw success today for Damian Harris. We saw success for Darrington Evans. We saw success for Ty Johnson. And, I want to shout out the running backs for having that success there. But I think when you plug in all these different backs and you continue to see all the success, you have to give a significant amount of credit to the offensive line and the scheme and what's being done up front. And I've been banging the drum for how important I think the run game is going to be for the Buffalo Bills coming into this season. No, that doesn't mean it needs to be like a 50-50 split or there needs to be some specific ratio, but with the nature of how NFL defenses are and the Bills needing that pivot, I thought the run game was significantly important, especially with how it ties to 12 personnel, yada, yada, so on and so forth. I was very encouraged by another strong performance, not just from the starters on the offensive line, but the Alec Andersons and the Ike Butkers. And Ryan Bates is technically like a starter, but him rolling with the twos, even some things we saw from Vandermark at certain points, all again from a run perspective. It's nice to see the Bills developing an identity when it comes to the run game and maintaining physicality from week to week while not losing execution. And to have that physical presence in the run game paired with execution, and then pairing that with Josh Allen and the Bills passing attack, that gives me a lot of hope for what this offense holistically could be come regular season time.
Really well said. And I think there's actually even more to take from that, because obviously you look at it and 33 carries for 174 yards, 5.3 yards a carry. That's awesome by any standards. But it wasn't bloated by like an 80-yard run.
Yes.
Heck, the one long run, I think John Robert here on Facebook was even talking about. Darrington Evans' 35-yard touchdown run was awesome. Like, beautiful. He earned every one of those yards like that. There was no blown coverage, no easy, nothing to that. He broke like 4 tackles for that run.
Yep.
And the thing that I like is it also wasn't James Cook earning yards by beating people to the corner and sweeping around. I love the fact that he looked pretty tough running up the middle, and then you bring in Damian Harris, and it was only 7 carries, but he looked pretty good. He looked tough. He looked like what we expected to add when we brought a guy like that in. And I know in the Cover One chat during the game, we were kind of debating on like, it's interesting that they rested Murray and that they gave Harris maybe a little bit more run than you would expect in a preseason game. And I think a lot of that is simply he never touched the ball in either of the other 2 games. And out of all the players in any position in training camp, the ones who get the least realistic work are running backs. Because even when you go thud, you don't take to the ground. So like, you don't really know, okay, would I have kept running or would he have tackled me? Did I actually break that tackle or did he not? Like, the running backs get the
Am I a fraud?
What? But I mean it, like, they get the least real world reps of any position. Everybody else, like, when DBs and receivers go at it, like, they go at it like in a game. Like, that's real. That they get flagged, they argue about physicality. Nobody does that with a running back. Like, nobody's like, destroy. You don't have Matt Milano full speed as a missile there. So I love the look of what we got with all those guys getting real reps. I think it made sense to give Harris run. I think we're going to see Latavius Murray and Damian Harris probably more of a shared role. That you had a lot of people thinking it was Harris sharing with Cook. And I actually think it's Cook and then Harris and Murray sharing behind him. I think Cook has kind of split, especially again today, another one, pass protection. Having James Cook pick up actual pass protection. He had the really nice one last game where it was, sticking his nose in there and stopping it dead. But at least seeing that is a huge step forward for a 199-pound guy. So I love that, and I think the running game looks good, and I don't expect it to shift and we become like a more balanced offense. I think we're still going to be one of the most pass happy teams in the league because we still have Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. But you and myself and so many others have said the exact same thing. I don't want to run more. I just want to run more effectively when we run. And I actually feel legitimate confidence that might be the case this year.
You know where I could see a significant uptick in overall run percentage? The low red zone especially, but I could see red zone time. The Bills just really lean into the 12 personnel or heavy looks, and they run it down people's throats with Harris or Murray, or you're running it down and people know that tendency, and that's when you start to build that Josh Allen bootleg game and you get him on the move and you put defenses in absolute hell come red zone time. That was also encouraging from the run game today. Damian Harris gets almost like walked into the end zone. He did the line. Go ahead.
So one thing that gets lost in the legitimate concern over Spencer Brown, voiced accurately, he's still a pretty badass run blocker.
He's a tremendous run blocker. You see his physicality and athleticism on like almost every rep in the run. That
play for the touchdown that you referenced is what spurred it in my mind. I was watching. I could tell what was coming. You could see the way the motion went. You could see, I think it was Sherfield or Shorter, kind of went out and then kind of cut back a little bit. I'm like, oh, they're just going to run right up there behind there. So I'm watching Torrance and Brown. They just took the two defensive linemen and walked them back like 4 yards. And Harris just kind of like trotted along into the open space behind them and was like, oh, hey, I guess I scored now.
Yeah, right.
It was fantastic.
Let me just fall into the end zone. Yeah, it was just the offensive line created that vertical displacement, reestablished the line of scrimmage. Harris, again, he finds his way, gets in easily. Yeah, that piece I think is going to make life so much easier for Josh Allen and Ken Dorsey, and just, again, put defenses in hell, because then you have to respect that piece down low when Murray or Harris come in, and they're so effective in the red zone, especially around the goal line. And then you add in the athleticism for Knox and Kincaid and all the other pieces. That's really where I'm even more excited to see what the run game can do. Or again, if you have those one-off games where this team is tremendous in coverage, but their run defense sucks. Okay, cool. We're going to run it down your throat. Maybe instead of our normal like 65-35 ratio, maybe it's a little more 55-45 today. Or if there's a weather-based game, just knowing that they have that in their back pocket and having that gun in the holster and actual ammunition for it has me very excited. So very pleased with the run game piece. What was your second takeaway from the offense today?
I know when we were kind of prepping ahead of time and you had said, I'm sure there's some overlap. My second one, I know there's overlap because I saw your fantastic tweet about it. And I had joked about how, Dalton Kincaid has been a lot of things so far. And there's been a lot of encouraging signs. Obviously, the usage is going to be great. The nuance in the route running, his, everybody talked about his smoothness and his efficiency with his footwork. Well, now we saw he's also pretty savvy, pretty smart too, right? Because there was an uncatchable ball going over his head, and there was the tiniest bit of contact from the defender, and he straight out like Emmy award-winning sold it and took a dive and got the defensive pass interference. It's a rookie.
It was soccer level. Like, I'm in the box, someone touched me, I need to draw the penalty. Like, that's it. Yeah.
It wasn't like I think my text or my reply to you was, it was like 7% interference, 93% selling. Like, it wasn't completely fabricated, but he like barely touched him and just completely sold it. And it's just one more heady little mature thing to get excited about, and all the reasons that everybody rightfully throws out the, hey, pump your brakes, look at every rookie tight end production over the years. That's because of the lack of maturity and knowledge and nuance and the mix of pass running, working with the receivers on the route running, and working with the offensive line coach on the blocking. He's already got all this stuff, and he doesn't have to worry all that much about this stuff. He's going to play, and he's going to play well.
Yeah, real quick, I gotta rules, super chat, get some automatic priority. Carl, you are a regular supporter and viewer here of the show, and I think the brand as a whole.
Yep.
So Carl,
Carl's great.
Yeah, Carl's fantastic. 1, thank you very much for being here. 2, thank you very much for the super chat and the comment here as well. Carl says, with McGovern out, I watched Edwards and he did well. Yeah, I'm excited to see. There were a couple reps on the broadcast where I saw really good seals from David Edwards and just good movement from him. He's someone too who I thought he's had a good preseason overall. I wish, when we mentioned it earlier with the depth inside, I really wish I felt so secure about the tackle grouping as I did the interior. It's McGovern and Bates and Torrance and Edwards and even like Nick Broker and Alec Anderson inside. I'm like, oh, these guys are cool. And then we get to the tackles and I'm just like, woof.
Ike Bacher and Nick Broker are like NFL playable guards. And there are 5th and 6th guards and aren't going to make the team. And we're not sure if we have 2 NFL starting caliber tackles on the roster amongst everybody.
And I love that they put Alec Anderson at right tackle today. And I was like, well, let's get him some work. And then he got worked.
For anybody who doesn't know the strip sack fumble that they got Kyle Allen on, I looked back, I saw 70. I was like, wait a minute, isn't that Alec Anderson? I had to go back and look. I even had to go in and look up the roster numbers to make nice. Did I miss something here?
What happened?
Was that Alec Anderson?
Is Ryan Vandermark 70 now?
I swear to God, that's literally what went through my head. Was like, did they switch? No. Alec Anderson was playing right tackle and got roasted. Yeah. But good for them trying to see if there's anything else out there.
And he had what sucked too is there was a couple reps before that where they ran the ball where you just saw his physicality and nastiness from the tackle spot and just washed his man down. And I was sitting there like on bated breath, like, please work out at right tackle, please. And then that sack happened, and I was just like, crap. Same thing with Vandermark. Vandermark looks really good at left tackle, and you put him at right tackle, and it's like he doesn't know how to play. Again, they're completely different spots, but it's just like, we have all this depth coming out of our ears and our eyeballs on the interior, and we just don't have it on the bookends.
Yeah, it's that. I mean, there's a reasonable discussion that Ryan Vandermark has played better at left tackle than Spencer Brown has at right tackle. Unfortunately, Ryan Vandermark has not played better at right tackle than Spencer Brown has played at right tackle, so it doesn't really matter.
I would entertain the hell out of that discussion. If Vandermark at left tackle had played that same way at right tackle, I would be here for the discussion and debate of should Ryan Vandermark be the starting right tackle? But no, he's been even more mercurial with more significant.
Weirdly worse. I know, I get it. He's a UDFA. He's doing everything he can just to play at a NFL roster level to make a team, and he has that will come up. He is our backup left tackle right now in my mind.
I'd put him over Quessenberry.
Yeah, I think he's but both Brown and Quessenberry are better at right tackle than he is, which isn't saying much. It's just he's even worse than they have been at right tackle. It's just, unfortunately, like you said, I don't want to derail this completely, but at some point we'll get to the point of, do we need to find out if Ryan Bates can still play right tackle? He did at Penn State. At some point, are we going to need to find that out?
Does he have to be like a complete Swiss Army knife? And they're like, we need you to know 4 positions, legitimately from the left guard spot to the right tackle spot. But yeah, interesting, good, awesome comment there, Carl, and thank you for the super chat. And I'm right with you there on Kincaid. I don't even have that much to add. It's what was cool today was, and again, you referenced in that tweet, he just seems so ahead of the curve and so far advanced in all the nuanced and technical areas. It's one thing to come into the league and be like, well, I mean, yeah, of course he's fluid and athletic because he's a fluid and athletic guy, yada, yada, yada. But to be able to continue to see him understand leverage and coverage, and he's beating guys in one-on-one scenarios, whether it's third teamers, second teamers, first teamers, he is proving to be a matchup advantage against linebackers and against safeties and man coverage. And yeah, just those little bits today of him knowing oh, this guy's grabbing me here. Cool. Let me lean a little bit this way and go down. And he drew both calls, sold them tremendously. Especially the second one, like you said, his arm got grabbed. It didn't get grabbed to the point where he should have fell down to the ground. And then Ron had commented in the chat, he was on the sideline kind of laughing about it because you could tell people were, giving him a little bit for it. And even the one before on Tyreek Stevenson in the low red zone, he draws that flag because of a good route. He gets into Stevenson and plants and goes out, and Stevenson has to tug and grab, and he doesn't embellish that one. He legitimately draws it because of his feel for the man, feel for the spacing, and understanding of what he needed to do. Oh, there's John saying it too. Yeah, he was laughing on the sidelines. He knew what he did, and him having that awareness and that presence of mind already before we've even hit the regular season. An awesome comment from Walter. Kincaid only played his third preseason game. Already has the refs in his pockets. Things are looking promising. And yeah, I feel like some people kind of say it jokingly. That's a significant piece to understand how to draw those calls and play your opponents like that. That's not a regularity for rookies, let alone rookie tight ends. He's ahead of the curve significantly, and I'm very excited.
All those cliches you hear about second and third year bumps, the game's slowing down for you, and you hear the guys where you hear he plays at a different speed. It's the people that it comes naturally to, those things just he doesn't have to worry about all the other things where other guys literally in their minds might be counting their steps, might be focus. Okay, I know I need to make sure, to get out of the break. And I got to make sure I want to give a head fake this way. And then I want to go that way. Mm-hmm. And they're having to think through those things because they're trying to focus on it. Whereas he doesn't have to worry about it at all. All he has to do, he knows what to do intuitively. So he's able to focus on, that's my arm a little bit. Here I go.
Oh no, I've been grabbed.
And just the fact that he can have the presence of mind to do that in his third preseason game is just very encouraging. I don't want to make too big of a deal out of it, but it's just another little sign that hey, all the excitement and hype around this guy, it's okay to get excited. He's going to be really good.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say at this point, he's probably on track to be the greatest NFL player I've ever seen, and probably of all time. And that might be underselling him a little bit. At this
Michael
point.
Jordan might need to worry.
All athletes in all sports.
Yeah, Messi, Pele. So and I will say the one thing, and even Seth here, there were people, Daniel Jeremiah had him as his number 9 overall player.
We were talking about it in Mobile.
That was real.
You and I were sitting there at night one talking about different draft boards and stuff, and we were like, "Wow, Jeremiah has Kincaid super high."
Yes, yeah, and that was I tell everybody all the time, I don't even start my draft work until that time. At that point was literally when I was discovering he was a human who existed.
Oh, this is a person.
Yeah. Oh, hey, that's a person. Oh, hey, that's a person that Daniel Jeremiah has a 9th overall, and now fast forward, and now he's my favorite person ever. But I will say the one hot take that I put out there was after some of the initial hype and things like that was I think Dalton Kincaid is going to be the greatest tight end in Bills history before his rookie contract expires.
Ooh, I like that.
And I feel better about it now. I feel better. I was just being, hyperbolic in the moment, but I feel better about it now than I even did in the moment because 5 seasons worth of the stats I think he's going to put up, I really do. I think he's going to own every Bills tight end record because it's a really low bar, sadly.
Yeah,
and he's going to own all of them within those first 5 years.
I like that stance. I also really like this is a good comment. Calm down. Kincaid has to surpass Isabella first before the other offense.
Funny you say that. Let me get to my third point for offense.
There you go. So one of my top 3 points was also Dalton Kincaid. So there's that overlap. So Greg, the floor is yours again for your number 3 point for the offense.
Hopefully today was the wake-up call that Andy Isabella is a very nice story, and I even think still in discussion for maybe snagging that 53rd roster spot. He's also not Julian Edelman plus Wes Welker plus Cole Beasley, except faster.
I love the plus, not even that he's them individually.
No.
He's added
all
together.
Of them combined plus runs a 4.29. So I just hope he fumbled the punt return. He was okay in the couple of routes that he ran. He was running routes in the third and fourth quarter. He was playing special teams in the third and fourth quarter. If we release him, no one is going to claim him. No one is going to sign him. If we release him, he will very easily make it onto our practice squad. If Khalil Shakir's rib injury is more serious than what some people think, or maybe we find out it's more serious than we know, and he goes on short-term IR, I think it is completely feasible that Andy Isabella is the next receiver that gets called up but if you want to be honest, I think you can make just as good a case for Keyshawn Johnson, and that he's been just as good or better, but that he didn't have the draft pedigree and the 40 time, so nobody got excited about him actually producing or outproducing Isabella every game. So again, I started out trying to like calm everybody down, but just hold on, just settle down. It's not as exciting. And then they gave him his own press conference, and he was getting reps with Josh Allen, and they were trying to give him like first team gunner reps. And I was like, all right, he's obviously showing them enough in practice that they're trying to find, can we get him on the roster here somewhere? So I had to take it seriously. I'm like, all right, I moved him up. He's now there with Shakir and Shorter and those guys fighting for one of the roster spots. And I think today showed, all right, it was okay to pump the brakes a little bit, and that he still has a shot at the roster, but if we release him, no one's going to care. And you could tell, for anybody who wasn't in Buffalo and had, like, I had to watch it on the NFL Plus broadcast, which meant the Bears broadcast. I hate listening. I don't mind national broadcast. It's horrible listening to opposing home teams, like how home teams have to listen to Steve Tasker and Chris Brown.
Oh God, I can't imagine.
It's fantastic. So and you could tell the Bears announcers, the language and the tone was, oh shit, Andy Isabella's still in the league. That's fun. That's
funny. Look at him go.
They did not know he was on a roster until he caught a ball. And they were like, oh, Andy Isabella I believe the phrase was, Andy Isabella's still kicking around and on a new team.
Oh, that's brutal.
I believe that was the phrasing used. So just to get outside of our bubble, a team with a roster that needs help were not aware he was in the league.
Fair point. And I guess a negative strike to Andy Godabella. Making this team. I like your point about Keyshawn Johnson, because he
deserves all the attention Isabella's getting too.
So much of the conversation has been, well, Isabella, and then like Shakir's like crept into it, but a lot of it initially was like, oh, are you keeping Shorter or are you keeping Isabella? Like Shorter or Isabella, Shorter or Isabella. And after the first game, I was like, I like Keyshawn Johnson. I was like, yeah, but it's one game. He runs crisp routes for his size. He's got good hands. He plucks the ball. Like, I'm here for that conversation. If that's funny from RJ. Oh wow, Andy Isabella is still in the league. We'll hang in the hallways.
Bulletin board material, baby.
Hey, look what they're saying about you, Andy. Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation to see what. I mean, it starts with how many receivers are they going to keep.
Yeah.
And what's muddied the situation is, Isabella looked really good, but is also kind of replacement level in certain areas at certain points. Shorter had a really good game last week, but then followed it up in between that good game against Pittsburgh was him being non-existent in week 1 against the Colts, and then existing today, but in mainly a negative fashion. A lot of it's like several drops, him not really playing to his size. And again, that drops issue was something that kind of plagued him a bit at Florida.
1 catch on 5 targets for Shorter today.
And it wasn't one of those like, well, he was targeted and it was overthrown every time. Like
maybe one.
Yeah, maybe one. 3 of those were in the breadbasket, in his hands. Granted, a couple of them were contested catches, but with his size and his frame, you'd like to see him go up and win those balls. Like, I think it's a very fair. If they keep 6 wide receivers, and I'm saying Shakir is like one of, so if it's Diggs and Davis and Hardy and Sherfield and Shakir, and that 6th receiver is Justin Shorter, okay. If it's Andy Isabella, okay. If it's Keyshawn Johnson, okay. Like, sure. I think you could make a case for any of these guys at some point, and now it becomes that the time-honored tradition of, okay, who can we stash? Your comment and joke of always like, okay, who can we tell to go wait in the parking lot for 15 minutes so we can go do something with them and then bring them back in? Like,
and
trying
in
to
fairness, Isabella is one of those guys, but so is Keyshawn Johnson, so is Terrell Shaver, so is Marcel Aitman.
Yeah,
any of those guys could be.
And so now you're trying to play that kind of that musical chairs type piece. But yeah, I think that's a fair point. Like, Isabella kind of set the world on fire, but also kind of came back to reality a little bit. Although I think he could have had some more production today if Kyle Allen was like just airmailing throws left and right in certain areas. And that didn't just affect Isabella, that affected some of the other guys too. But yeah, that receiver spot is very much, I think it's up for grabs for more than just like one or two guys. Like, and you can make a case in a multitude of ways depending on like how you're feeling that day. Like, there's a significant decision that has to. I mean, significant as far as like who's going to be the sixth receiver on the depth chart, but significant as like you could make a case going any way, which way for any of those three guys. Yeah. Fair point. I'm also going to stick with the passing game piece, but I'm going to tie it to a personnel grouping. I'm going to tie it to the 12 personnel piece. Just the little flashes we saw today. Again, I know it's preseason, but already you started to see the examples of the bind that a defense is put into when the Bills can run 12 personnel and be effective running the ball out of those formations. We saw multiple looks today where the Bears walked the safety down and were in single high coverages, and the Bills took advantage of it. There was a one deep crosser to Trent Sherfield that was a large completion off of a heavier personnel formation and alignment, because that's the piece too. It's not just 12 personnel, and it's like, yeah, 12 personnel, but you're in a 2x2 gun look out of spread or something like that. No, it's 12 personnel, and your two tight ends are either attached to the line or it's that hipped off look where, one tight end is in line next to a tackle and you have the other tight end hipped off next to him. Or the touchdown to Quentin Morris was more of like an old school type of formation. You had your two receivers to the left, and then you had Gilliam in an offset strong eye formation, and then Quentin Morris was your tight end. So running that 12 or those heavier personnel packages out of more traditional heavier personnel alignments, if you can run the ball out of those looks, defenses have to respect it. And the way they're most likely going to respect it is walking that safety down, now being in a single high alignment, and you can just eat on those deep overs and those seam balls. And the Bills have the weaponry in the tight ends and the receivers to eat in those seams and eat on those crossers. And again, it was a small example, small sample size, but already starting to kind of see the fruits of that 12 personnel labor. Got me very excited today.
Yeah. And I tempered some of the expectations initially because we talked about how, they ran some of the least 12 personnel in the league last year. Also, it was, falsely deflated because every time Reggie Gilliam's on the field, they mark him as a fullback. So we also ran a weirdly high amount of 21 personnel when
we were like top 3 or 4 in 21, but then obviously like one of the lowest in 12, but it's muddied because of that fact.
Yeah, when Reggie Gilliam would come in a game last year and line up next to a tackle with his hand in the dirt, everyone in their mind can see that right now. You know what position that is. They called that an extra fullback on the field and 2 running backs. So just an FYI, we weren't actually last in the NFL. In reality, all the other analysts who look at it like, oh, look, I looked it up. It said 12 personnel. We're the least in the league. But we actually weren't.
They never ran 12 personnel in their life.
But my mindset was, I bet you we're going to go from least in the NFL or lower, even with those snaps, it was still lower third, to maybe average. And I wish I could say who it was. It might have been Warren Sharp. Someone had put it out there that they thought the Bills were going to be top 3 in the league in 12 personnel. And my first reaction was, I don't know about that. And honestly, now I'm like, yeah, maybe we will. I don't know if it's going to be as much as like the Browns and the 49ers. Or maybe the Chiefs, I think, are the ones that run it the most. But
Packers ran it a ton last year. Seattle did.
Like, maybe we will be top 5. Maybe we will be one of the highest uses. Because, honestly, I want Dawson Knox next to Spencer Brown as often as humanly possible. Because not because I want him to stay in and fully block. Because half the time, just getting the defensive end to jump out another gap or to get an extra hand on him or a chip or a help on his way to leak out into his route is a huge benefit. Like this is going to be very condescending. Even Spencer Brown can pass block when you give him an extra chip or help or of those pieces. But I mean it. Like, yes, that will help Spencer Brown be more effective when you do that. So I hope that we see a ton of it. I still like Deontay Hardy and Trent Sherfield, and we're not going to go away from, I think, the highest percentage in the league at 11 personnel. Pretty close. Maybe behind the Rams.
Yeah, I actually have a bunch of them. They 72% usage rate at 11 personnel last year, which was 6th in the league as precise.
So that's obviously going to come down, but it's also not going to disappear. We're still going to have plenty of situations with 3 or even 4 receivers on the field.
Absolutely.
we are going to see a significant increase, and I think it's reasonable. Matter of fact, here I'll flip it back to you in this way. If you have to rank for me these 4 players in their percentage of snaps played on the offense, rank for me in order: Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield, Dawson Knox, and Dalton Kincaid.
Oh, that's dirty. What's funny? So like Sherfield and Hardy will almost not cancel each other out, but like impact each other's snap share and usage rates. I think
they could be equal amongst the 3rd and 4th high. I think
that's what I was going to say. I think 1 and 2 are
receiver.
Knox and Kincaid, depending on who you want to say is going to be higher than the other. But I think 1 and 2.
I won't even be surprised if it is Knox. I don't know that Kincaid literally leapfrogs Knox right off the bat, because there are rushing and blocking scenarios where you would have Knox on the field.
Yes.
But I think they are 1 and 2, and I think maybe by the end of the year it's even Kincaid and then Knox, and then I think it's Sherfield and Hardy both pretty equal, because I think Sherfield comes in anytime Diggs or Davis needs a blow, plus will play some slot snaps on his own. I think that Hardy plays more slot snaps than Sherfield, but Sherfield plays the other 2 spots, and I think altogether will play about the equal amount as the 3rd and 4th highest receiver. But I actually think there might even be a little bit of a gap between Knox and Kincaid, then Hardy and Sherfield.
I think that's a very fair point. Yeah, and the 12 personnel piece is going to be a significant grouping for this team. I think they kind of wanted it to be a little bit last year, and OJ Howard just wasn't the thing, but now they've got Kincaid, and it's kind of fallen into their laps a bit. And to put into, I pulled up some personnel usages from SIS. So last year, 12 personnel for the Bills. Again, take this with a grain of salt because Reggie Gilliam gums up the works. 12 personnel for the Bills last year, a 6% usage rate, which was 31st in the league. 21 personnel, 17% usage rate, which was 6th in the league. So say you combine those 2 together, they had a 23% usage rate of those 2. The Kansas City Chiefs, for example, they're the ones I always use as that benchmark. They had a 28% 12 personnel usage rate. That was 3rd highest in the league last year. So if you're getting to around 30% usage rate out of 12 personnel, you're going to be tops of the league. I think the Bills could legitimately hit that. Like they
it's
could
not
be
crazy at all.
No, like, and I don't even think, I know they've been at like 35 this preseason. It was like, oh, it's a huge outlier, yada, yada. I could see them kind of living at like 32, 33, like, and especially depending on the matchups every week, like it could be significant personnel grouping for them.
Let's reverse engineer that for a second. So let's say it's 32. That leaves 68% of the other snaps. Let's say that there's still 10% of everything else, which is empty sets, 10 personnel, or the other direction, 22, 23 jumbo stuff. So that leaves like 58. Well, if you just split that, and let's say Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid both run about 30% each, that means that plus the 32 that was there, now all of a sudden each of them are on the field for 65% of the snaps, and you're able to keep both of them fresh. They're both on the field all the time. You can do it by drive. You don't have to like have anything there, and you're still getting really nice usage out of a well-paid tight end and a first-round pick. I really think that's feasible. I really think that's in the running. And like, yes, in more shootout games, could it be more Dalton Kincaid? And in more, hey, kind of blowout 4-minute drill endings of games, could it be more Dawson Knox? I think that we could see 60-65% snap share for both of them and have it make sense.
And again, too, what factors into it is they can be in 12 personnel, but they don't have to be in those formations where both tight ends are attached to the line or they're hipped off of one another. They can be in their traditional 11 personnel looks where you've got Gabe Davis by himself to the right, Dawson Knox is next to Spencer Brown, and then Kincaid is in the slot, and Diggs is the number 1 receiver to the left, and they're in shotgun. That's going to count as 12 personnel, but it's an 11 personnel look. And I think those formations we're going to see a bunch of, because you can make the case that Dalton Kincaid is the 3rd best receiver on this team, even though he's a tight end. Like, and if he's the 3rd best receiver, then you're going to put him in receiver alignments and receiver sets. And if Knox happens to be on the field, cool, there's your 12 personnel. Like, that's a fun conversation.
So, random aside, I am in an absolutely psychopathic fantasy football league. that I can't even go into full description of. It's a 32-team, 40-man roster fantasy football team. Fantasy football league. Where like every defensive position, every offensive position, everything except for offensive line, kicker, and punter. Everything else. It came up, and everybody in the league knows I cover the Bills and have the show and everything like that. So anytime, like whether to go out and sign Terrell Dodson or AJ Klein is like a real thing in this league. It matters in this league.
Okay.
So Deontay Hardy is a free agent in that league. And the guys were writing to me, and I said, honest to God, if you had asked me April 15th, I would have told you, yes, he would absolutely be a target of mine because I think people are underselling how big of a part of this offense he's going to be, the contract they gave him, what they want him to be. I think you should target him. And then we drafted Dalton Kincaid. And it just, like, it doesn't mean, like, real football, I think Deontay Hardy is going to be really nice.
Yes.
Deontay Hardy is going, like, a bunch of Bills fans are going to see why they targeted him and paid him twice as much as what Isaiah McKenzie got paid. The fans are going to see that. And it's going to be fun and exciting. But for, like, the amount of volume you need to matter in fantasy football, unfortunately, Dalton Kincaid took all of that.
Absolutely.
and it's just not going to be there because he's looked so good and he's going to be the slot receiver.
Yeah, not to mention you add in red zone targets and 6 points for receiving touchdowns, and that's a very fair point. Very fair point. All right, Greg, let's switch to the defensive side of the ball, and I'm assuming we both had this at some point on our list, and I feel like we should just go with it because I see a couple people are going to murder each other in the chat over it. Let's talk about corner 2. I'm assuming it's on your list as one of the big takeaways. It's definitely on mine, and basically what we saw, so they highlighted at the start of the broadcast, Christian Benford started with the ones, and then Dane Jackson was up next. So it was Trey White and Benford, then Dane Jackson and Benford, and then Kaiir Elam came in. Effectively for this game, Kaiir Elam kind of looking as corner 4 out of those outside corners. Now, we have continued to hear throughout the entirety of this offseason, there is a plan for this competition. There is a plan for the rotation at corner 2. They've been planning everything. Who gets the reps with the 1s and the 2s and 3s each day in practice, camp, the scrimmage, preseason games, all of those things. But nonetheless, Kaiir Elam effectively being corner 4 on the outside in the final preseason game today is a bit noteworthy. Greg, what are your thoughts here on the cornerback 2 spot leaving this game here?
So I have been as adamant and outspoken as anyone about the potential and possibility of what we want Kaiir Elam to be and how important it is, how much optionality it gives in the defense because of the possibility of having a man-skilled corner that can let you be more aggressive and more creative and exotic in disguise coverages and the things it allows us to do. And I have had to, specifically in the last week or so on a couple of our shows even, I have had to kind of come clean in the fact that my desire for what I want Kaiir Elam to be is better than Dane Jackson. Kaiir Elam is not better than Dane Jackson. I can't continue to project the potential of what I want him to be over the reality of what's there. And I know some people will counter to that, say, yeah, but you got to let him play through the snaps and things like that. The Cardinals can let a guy with potential play through the snaps and struggle through it. The Texans can let a guy play through the struggles and try to reach his potential. Contenders, the locker room watches every day. The locker room knows who the best guys are. You have to play the best guys. If you're going to preach what we preach, and that we didn't let Ramon Humber keep the starting spot over Matt Milano. We didn't let, oh God, it's leaving me, the second round pick defensive tackle, the Kyle Williams played over.
John McCargo?
John McCargo.
He was still a first rounder.
First round pick. The trade up, our second pick of that draft. We didn't let John McCargo play over Kyle Williams. That's not the way it works. The best guy plays. Dane Jackson is the best guy. I hope someday Kaiir Elam can get his feet into the position where he doesn't feel the need to grab onto the receiver. Right now, he can't do that.
Yeah.
We can't find that out in a game. I have to let go of my projection of what I want Kaiir Elam to be until I see it. Right now, Dane Jackson is the better football player, and it is what it is.
That's a point, and I love that point. Well, several of the points you made. One of them in particular, because it's something I'm probably biased here because I've been saying it for a majority of the offseason. That argument for last year of, well, because, you know, they didn't let Kaiir play. They need to get him experience and time on task and all these pieces. There's 100% value to that. I think Kaiir Elam would be a better corner right now had he gotten more experience last year. I think that's a fair contention and a fair point. But when you are a team with championship aspirations, you have to weigh, okay, how do we balance the long-term goals and objectives versus the short-term goals we have right now? Because, yeah, you know what? If we play Kaiir, he's probably going to be better in 2023 and 2024 if we play him right now in 2022, if this was last season. But then also, how vulnerable are we right now? Because he's kind of, you know, misreading some calls here and not really running this correctly, and he's not in the right place where we need him to be. That's what the conversation was last year, that what I thought was based on watching the tape. Bean and McDermott echoed some of those similar sentiments when talking about him this year. And exactly to your point, Dane Jackson, he is not sexy. He's not big. He's not strong. He's not fast. He's not even really scheme versatile, but he's just reliable. He's usually in the right place at the right time. He's a lot better than Bills Mafia gives him credit for, because I know he had that 3 or 4 game stretch where he had some, you know, fail plays at the catch point. Go ahead, what do you got?
There was one game specifically, I think, against the Jets where he was targeted like something crazy, like 12 times. He was. And yes, rightfully, that was pretty horrific. Also, down the stretch, the final 7 games of the year, in 7 games, he was targeted 9 times and gave up 5 catches in 7 games. Also, if I asked you last year, what was the most common refrain of the thing he didn't do?
I know the stat too. Yeah, breaking up passes, plays at the catch point.
So one, not only was that probably not all that accurate because he had 10 pass breakups last year. What have we seen over and over this camp in preseason?
Him making plays
on the ball.
And Kaiir not making plays on the ball.
So all the things where everyone has been so focused on the improvement Kaiir Elam should have made, Dane Jackson literally made that improvement to his game. So all the things we wanted Kaiir Elam to do, Dane Jackson not only already had the higher floor, but didn't quite have the ceiling. He made the improvements on the area we wanted him to improve.
And he has that consistent floor, and it's reliable, and McDermott knows where he's going to be. And more importantly, Hyde and Poyer and Taron Johnson, they know where Dane Jackson is going to be. If they think he's going to be over here at A, that's usually where he is. Now, this does not mean that Kaiir Elam is a bust and he sucks and he should be cut or traded or it was a waste of a pick. I think there is still an argument to be made that the semblance of his ceiling is still there. Right now, he's just not ready to be CB2, whether it's the grabbiness, whether it's almost the panicking at kind of the catch point where he gets grabby. I've seen him be in phase because of his athleticism and technique, and then he just grabs or he latches, and you can almost just see him like he's just like, oh, and grabs, and you're just like,
it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating.
It's so frustrating. And it is also funny too, like he keeps being in position but like not making plays. And then on the other side of the ball, like as soon as Benford had that really good rep today against DJ Moore, I was just like, of course, that's how it's going for every corner that's not Kaiir Elam right now. And I still think he has that room to grow, but if we're looking at this corner 2 spot right now, for all intents and purposes, it is Dane Jackson's spot. He is CB2. And then the conversation starts to
I think Benford is pretty comfortably ahead as quarterback 3. If something happened to Dane or Tre'Davious, I don't think we're going to see a rotation with Dane Jackson. I think he's just going to be the starter. We'll see. We've seen it enough historically that I can't dismiss the possibility. But if something were to happen to either of them, I even think Christian Benford's the next guy in, and I think I think Dane Jackson has been better than Benford, but I think it's like this. Like I think that like you can make a case that Christian Benford's been as good or had flashes as well. I think Dane's been more consistent, but Benford's here and Elam's like here.
Yeah.
Those two have separated themselves.
And it's so unfortunate given, again, He was a first round pick and they did trade up technically for him and what you want him to be. And yes, he has the tools and the traits and all of these things physically. It's just not clicking right now. It's not
correct.
Clicking. That
everything you just said is why, and this comes up in the chat. I see it on Twitter all the time. We're not cutting him. We're also not trading him. Like, we're not that we're not trading him. Yes, everyone press that like button. Don't be silly.
Please don't be silly.
Don't be silly. We're not trading him, not because it's not possible that we may eventually trade him. Of course, that's possible. We're not trading him because right now we're at like an all-time low from an asset standpoint. Like, you don't trade a guy when he's struggling and not winning a job. And at that point, now don't get me wrong. If someone wants to pay us 90% of the value of where he was, I'll listen. Somebody wants to offer us a second-round pick.
Or if Tampa Bay's like, hey, we'll give you Tristan Wirfs for Kaiir.
Yes.
I'd be like, okay.
Whoever you would value as another, like, a little bit struggling former first round pick but has potential, like, sure, I'll listen. But some of the ideas of releasing him is absurd. It just as FYI, as putting on my cap nerd hat, it work. Costs us more to cut him than to just keep him. On top of the fact, he's 21 years old and is still our fourth best corner. Like, we go always into the mode of either someone's a star or a bum. He has not played as well as both Christian Benford and Dane Jackson. He's played better than Alex Austin. He's played better than Jamarcus Ingram. He's played better than Cam Lewis. Like, he's played good enough to be on a team. He's just not our starter. So just because he hasn't played to my, and I'm not even projecting this on other people, he has not played to my expectations and my hopes and my projection, but he hasn't been a bum. He just hasn't played enough to win the starting job. So people always equate, well, if he can't beat out those two, he is a bum and is a bust. That's just not, those aren't the only two options. No. Those aren't the only two things that are there. It's right now, is it okay to be disappointed in Kaiir Elam? Is it okay to feel like, oh, I don't know if we should have traded up for that guy? Absolutely. Absolutely. If he was doing what he should have been, he should have beaten out those two. He should have ran away with his job and been there. He has not. It's okay to be disappointed in that. If you go back and ask Bears fans how they felt about Leonard Floyd, they would have told you he was a bust too. He's had the top 10 sacks in the NFL the last 3 years. Yeah. Your story is not always written immediately.
No. And I'm a firm believer in the whole, like, you don't concretely judge or evaluate a player until after year 3. Even like someone who I've been consistently down on is Boogie Basham, and even Spencer Brown for me as well. I'm still, again, year 3. We'll see what happens for them. The biggest concern for Elam with me, and I've said it on the show at different points, and I've said it on Twitter, Sean McDermott's track record in Carolina and Philly, but even if we just exclude those and just focus on Buffalo, his track record of success with defensive backs, Micah Hyde was kind of a jack-of-all-trades DB and more of a slot guy and a returner, became an all-pro safety. Jordan Poyer was an afterthought that when he was drafted by the Bills, or when he was signed by the Bills, I'm sure Bills fans were like, who? Oh, this safety from the Browns? Oh, who is this guy? Became an all-pro. When the Bills took Trey White at the end of the first round, I don't think many people were saying, well, this guy's going to be an all-pro.
6th quarterback drafted?
Yeah.
Cornerback drafted that draft?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Super, like, not late, but there were significant corners taken ahead of him. And then look what they've done with Levi Wallace, Dane Jackson, Christian Benford, Taron Johnson. Sean McDermott has this strong track record of getting every single drop of blood from a defensive back stone year after year, player after player. What concerns me is you got a guy like Levi or Dane Jackson, right, who doesn't have a lot of blood in the stone. And McDermott found a way to get more blood and draw every single ounce of it out. Kaiir, naturally, he's got a ton of blood in the stone. And for some reason, it's taken a while to get out, or McDermott can't get it out. And that's what concerns me a bit, is he's on this team that has such a strong track record of defensive back development at multiple levels, corners and safeties. And this guy who is so traitsy and so toolsed up is still kind of slower in that development. That's concerning for me. But again, that doesn't mean, well, yeah, it's because he sucks and he's done. Like, we're not at that spot. And in a position like corner, like the offensive line and defensive line, you can never have enough cornerback depth. So no, I'm not trade Kaiir for a 6th or a 5th. No.
So here's an example. I'm not a big Devin White fan, so this is even the name I would go with, but that's the kind of player. Now, if a team had a, like, questionably talented middle linebacker that they weren't sure about and that they had depth like we do, where they're like, hey, we kind of have 3 starting caliber guys. Maybe we can. I know we just played the Bears, who's the Sanborn guy. Right?
Oh, yeah, Jack Sanborn.
Jack Sanborn. Where like, hey, they just signed 2 really expensive guys. He's not going to start for you guys, but he'll probably start for us.
Yeah.
That kind I don't know if Devin White's the name, but that's what I would need. I would need that, like, oh, you're going to offer us a guy who would come in and start at middle linebacker immediately, or you would offer us a guy who would come in and start at right tackle immediately. Okay, now I'm listening. But just trading him for the point of, like, he's a bum, we need to get him off the roster, I'll take a 4th round pick. No, like, there's no value in that. That's not going to help us with anything. Kaiir Elam might still help us. We don't know that. So I would need a name. Again, I don't think I would pick Devin White, but that's the kind of name I would need.
Stay in Chicago and be like Kaiir Elam for Tremaine Edmonds.
Yeah.
What do we think?
I'll give you Kaiir Elam and Ryan Bates. You wanted both guys. They'll stay here. Just give us Tremaine Edmonds back and we'll call it even.
And eat 90% of his salary and we'll call a spade. And we're all good to go.
Totally fine.
And yeah, good comment here from Beta Jim saying, yeah, it's not like Benford and Jackson are bad. They're both playing at above average CB2s. Yes, Dane Jackson has a high floor. The problem is his ceiling is like low end CB2, and that's not sexy enough for people. And also too, even with the rookie argument, and I know you've said it a bunch on your show and on Twitter, for all the people who are like, oh, because McDermott's holding Elam back because he doesn't play rookies. He played Benford a bunch.
We started the 6th round rookie over the 1st round rookie. He seems perfectly fine starting rookies.
What are we doing? Oh, that corner conversation. Yeah, very volatile. Oh, I do want to say one thing.
All the other, just since the same people who yell at me about that, it's usually about one other player. Do you all feel the same about Khalil Shakir right now?
Ooh, dropping the heat.
Do you all feel just as confident that it was Sean McDermott holding Khalil Shakir back? Is that what you feel now?
Not great. Not great. All right, moving. Actually, I do want to say one thing. I did see how I scrolled back and saw how the chat kind of went into chaos a little bit. I saw some of the insults that were slung at people. This is just for this show now or anytime anybody tunes in. Certain attacks that are laid and the type of insults to certain groups of people, if that type of stuff is used, you're gone, and I'll continue to remove you every time you show up. That type of insult and that level of immaturity and nastiness and maliciousness from a verbiage standpoint, I won't tolerate on the show ever. So you know who you were and what you said. Yeah, you're not great. Not great, my man. Not great. All right, let's move on to another point for the defensive side of the ball. Hopefully it's something that unites the people and brings everyone together, but I doubt it will be. So, Greg, what was your other big takeaway?
Well, just because you said that, I'm debating switching which one I was going to do.
I know what it's going to be, then just do it.
Yeah, because we still don't have an answer at middle linebacker. I have so many eggs in the basket of going into camp. I thought the betting favorite and the most likely guy to start was Terrell Bernard. I said,
agreed.
I hoped Dorian Williams would run with it because of his traits and some of the flashes. I was virtually certain that Terrell Dodson would get the first snap there just because that's how we operate, and he was the guy who stepped in for Edmonds, and he was the veteran, and that I think the most likely eventual starter was Terrell Bernard. Mm-hmm. Then we saw him look good in camp, dropping into coverage, moving in space. He got tied for the most first-team reps. It was him and Dodson, and then at one point Spector, and then just Dodson and Bernard.
Yeah.
And then he hurt his hammy. And then after he hurt his hammy, everyone else played like poo-poo.
Yeah.
So, in my mind, it's only increased that likelihood that he is the most likely answer. But now I can't tell how much of that is me being like analytical and connecting dots, and now how much I'm just wishing and hoping. And that, please God. So the thing I've kind of reserved myself to is I don't believe we have a starting caliber middle linebacker on the roster. I don't. We are going to start someone, and someone is going to play. And I think Terrell Bernard is okay enough in coverage that it's going to function and it's going to work, and that he has the potential to be more than that. But I have now seen with my eyes, Terrell Dodson cannot start. He can't. You cannot start him.
Yeah, not great.
AJ Klein is smart. He can call the defense. He's fine in run coverage. luckily enough for us, the beginning of the season is soft enough in the schedule that we could probably survive if Terrell Bernard needed to miss some time. But AJ Klein is the guy you isolate and go after. Like you target him in coverage because he just can't move like that anymore. We're not going to have. I don't think there's any scenario we're going to have a high-end middle linebacker. Maybe Terrell Bernard can play well enough that we feel decent about it. Everybody yells at me about Dorian Williams, and I just used the Patrick Queen example. Patrick Queen, when they asked him to carry all of the load of calling the defense, deciphering the offense, knowing where to drop in space, all the different things, he was a bust. And Ravens fans would tell you he's a bust. Guess what? They brought in Roquan Smith to take over all the intellectual part of it, and they said, hey, Patrick, go over there and see ball, get ball.
Yeah.
And now he looks great.
Just go play fast.
So all the flashes you see of Dorian Williams playing fast and looking good and see ball, get ball is because they're not asking him to do any of the other things. And when they asked him to do the other things, they saw it for a little bit and went, oh, no. All right, you go over there and you focus on that.
Yeah.
We don't have that guy.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And a lot of the plays that Dorian Williams has been making so far, I know it can get confusing for people at times, because he'll make a play where he's lined up in the middle, but from a structure perspective, he's not the middle linebacker in these reps. He's the Matt Milano role, which is the shoot gap, see ball, get ball type of role, not the more mental, have to take on, do the garbage, dirty work middle linebacker spot that Tremaine Edmonds occupied, or AJ Klein, or all these other pieces. And I'm in a similar boat. I don't love Terrell Bernard. I think he's the least of all the evils when it comes to the linebacker position, because he doesn't have any area. I mean, maybe his size is this potential red flag, but Terrell Bernard doesn't have any one area in his game where he's deficient or he's a vulnerability. He's kind of just like average or slightly above average at everything, which isn't fun, isn't sexy. Although I do think he's a very good blitzer. He comes downhill like a blows things up, and he's very smart, very heady, but he's not the biggest or the fastest or the strongest. He's not some plus athlete. He's not some plus area here. Like on everything, if you graded him in like every single silo for a linebacker, he's like a 5.5 to a 6.5 or a 7. I was
just going to say, he's like a 60 at everything.
That's what he is. But then the other linebackers you have, like Dodson and Klein, you may have some areas where they're kind of like a 7, 7.5. And then they've got other areas where they're like a 2 or a 1.5. And there's that huge discrepancy in that vulnerability piece. And I wanted it to be Bernard all offseason for those reasons. And it's funny, like you kind of saying him being out. I tweeted it earlier in the week. Like, I wonder if him being out helped his case, because no one else has really played great. And if we're at the point right now where Terrell Bernard isn't ready for week 1, and I feel bad saying this because I feel like it's disrespectful. Give me AJ Klein. AJ Klein isn't, and this isn't because he's awful. He's very long in the tooth with a lot of miles on the tires. AJ Klein should not be a starting linebacker in 2023. The fact that he's in this conversation speaks to the blech of the linebacker position for the Bills.
And I do think that Terrell Bernard practiced in uniform the last 2 days. Mm-hmm. He was out there in team drills. He was out there in uniform warming up today.
Yeah, and he was on the sideline. He had an earpiece in with the defense.
Yes, and why would someone wear an earpiece in on the defense?
Tricky.
So there were beat reporters who thought he was going to play today, the degree to which he was warming up. So I think 16 days from our first game, I think it's very feasible he could start week 1 against the Jets.
Agreed.
If he doesn't, or if we need to ease him in, you can sell me a short yardage, goal line, obvious rundown of AJ Klein, normal first and second down of Terrell Bernard, and every third and long, just bring in Taylor Rapp.
Raptor package.
I'm okay with that. And if Bernard shows more than that, and to be completely honest, it doesn't really matter which of Klein or Dodson is the obvious rundown goal line thing. Dodson's actually perfectly good at that.
Yeah, he can function there.
Yeah, he's perfectly good at that too. He is good at coming downhill and doing those things.
Yeah.
And if Bernard runs with it beyond there, God bless him, that's great. And it just becomes 80% Bernard and 20% Rapp. That's great. That is a wonderful thing, and we will be happy. but that's the only scenario. And I know a lot of people in the chat and everybody on Twitter asked very similar questions. I want to find, it was phrased where I think it was Ryan Hill here. Are there any starting caliber middle linebackers likely to be cut by other teams? No. No one cuts starting caliber middle linebackers. That's part of the problem. Now, the exception to that, so no, there is not anybody who's going to get cut who would come in and start for us. Now, maybe there's valuable depth. Maybe there's somebody who's worth keeping. That's possible, but somebody who would just come in and leapfrog and start, no. However, we brought up Jack Sanborn. Jack Sanborn is the third linebacker. He's not going to play for the Bears. There are other people like him. There are a couple names like that in San Francisco. I'll go through. I did a list at one point. There is some depth out there that are going to Detroit, because Detroit capped Alex Anzalone and drafted Jack Campbell.
Looks sweet.
Which means they also have Malcolm Rodriguez floating around there. There are some teams like that so I'm not joking. If you told me in a private moment, hey, we need to give up Kaiir Elam to get Malcolm Rodriguez or to get Jack Sanborn, I would need to take a moment. I would need to take
I like Rodrigo a lot. So
if you told me we could get Malcolm Rodriguez by sending Kaiir Elam to Detroit, Malcolm Rodriguez would come in and would start day one.
That is true.
He would come in and would start day one.
Absolutely.
So again, with the Devin White conversation or whoever it might be, if you told me one of those, and again, nobody is giving up a starting caliber tackle anywhere in the NFL. Josh Jones was a weird one because last year you had DJ Humphries went out. So Kelvin Beachum and Josh Jones both played and played reasonably well. Both of them played last year, played better than Spencer Brown. I don't know that they will always be better than Spencer Brown. Last year, they both played better than Spencer Brown. Then DJ Humphries came back, and then they drafted Paris Johnson, 7th overall. Somehow the worst roster in the NFL had the two best backup tackles in the NFL.
Fair point.
So Houston lost Titus Howard. They outbid us for him. Their pick was more valuable than our pick, even if we both offered 5th-round picks. Of course, Arizona's going to pick Houston's pick over our pick. Yeah. If you want to argue, should we have done a 4th or something like that, whatever, at some point there is a line. We still could go after Kelvin Beachum, but that's the kind of player at linebacker. A Malcolm Rodriguez or a Jack Sanborn are the kind of players that you would need to trade for one of them because they're going to make their teams. Of course, they're going to make their roster the same way, and for the same reason, Kaiir Elam's going to make our roster because he's good enough to make the roster. Just because they don't start doesn't mean they're not good enough to make the roster. But that would be the kind of player we'd have to go after, and you'd have to give up something real to get a play because those are good players. You'd have to give up something real, like maybe a 3rd-round pick, or it would need to be like a Boogie Basham and a 4th or something like that. You'd have to give up something legitimate.
Yeah, something real. To get something real, you have to give up something real. I think, very fair point. And so I echo all those sentiments. Linebacker was the same takeaway from me. I want to dive into a bit of the Taylor Rapp piece. I love the idea so much of Taylor Rapp becoming the dime linebacker. Especially after going back and watching the Super Bowl tape of them against the Bengals. He was not the starting safety, either of the starting safeties in that game. It was Eric Weddle, God bless his soul, and Nick Scott. Taylor Rapp was coming in on 3rd downs and passing downs as the dime linebacker, and he was covering Jamar Chase in the slot. And he was functioning in and around the box. I would love that for Taylor Rapp. The wonkiness, because I saw a lot of the comments come through for like, Rapp at middle linebacker. When you get to those spots where he is like the dime linebacker, you don't want to get into so much of a siloed platoon that teams are able to dictate to you off of that piece where they know, like, okay, if we put this personnel grouping and show this type of passing look, they're going to pull AJ Klein off the field and they're going to put in Taylor Rapp. And when they do that, then we can run right at him and we can run right at Rapp because go ahead.
The reason it works in those dime settings is because you're in a 3rd and 7 or longer, 3rd and 8 or longer, where they can no longer dictate because you're like, oh, you're going to try to pretend you're going to run? God bless you. Go ahead.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And you're like, oh, cool. Yeah, have fun gaining your 7 yards because you need 12 for a 1st down and it's not going to work or whatever that is. Like, you don't want to get into those spots where your starting linebacker isn't functional in coverage. So you need Taylor Rapp to come onto the field, because then if teams start passing on you on first and second down on a certain formations, you're vulnerable. And if you want to sub in Taylor Rapp for that, now you're potentially vulnerable against the run. And then Taylor Rapp and Matt Milano as a run-fitting linebacker duo isn't ideally what you want, especially on early downs. That's the trickiness of the platoon situation. You can get into tendencies and predictability, and offenses can then dictate to you and put you in binds. Adam's throwing a ton of names. Devin White, Jabril. Oh, I remember Jabril Cox from LSU or Deion Jones. There's a lot of like, I don't want to say scraping the bottom of the barrel, but these guys like names who can float around to that degree. I haven't seen Jabril Cox in a bunch. I would take Devin White for what he is, but he's got some vulnerability issues in his game. I would have loved Levante David, his running mate in Tampa, who...
And I heard that report that he said on the Levante David said on the Rich Eisen show.
Bills reached out, but he had already signed or something?
That the Bills were pushing hard and that he just didn't want to leave.
Oh, okay. That was it. I remember hearing when
the comment was the Bills were pushing hard.
Okay, cool. I remember hearing something initially like after he signed where I thought it was like, yeah, I knew they had made an offer, but he didn't want to leave, or he had already decided to stay, and it was a little too
he almost gave the impression that if he was going to leave, it would have been for Buffalo, but he just didn't want to leave.
Oh, that was my dream scenario with what he could do. There, and also the problem is too with
the maturity of adding a guy like that would have been
amazing. Like the between the ears, the leadership.
Yes, and not that he's perfect, but he would have been just fine.
Yes, he would have been fine. He would have been able to mitigate enough. Like he's not all pro Levante David, but he's more than serviceable. And what's also tough too is like with this position, we've already seen it in the preseason a little bit. We saw it with Dodson again today, where he kind of threw up all over himself trying to cover a running back or a tight end out of the backfield. Like the linebacker spot is asked to do certain things in coverage that requires athleticism. It requires the football IQ to understand it, whether it's you're running Tampa 2 and you got to carry somebody vertically, or you're running quarters, you got to understand whether to wall off number 3 or carry this or do that. There's a lot that's asked of that position. And if you have a guy
specifically by us,
yes, specifically by in the Bills defense. And if they don't have a guy who can do that, your coverage menu becomes significantly more limited, or you become vulnerable in the interior. We've already seen, like, this is probably an exaggeration and a hyperbolic statement, I feel like I've seen more passes completed over the middle in the preseason than I have the last 4 years with Tremaine Edmonds on the field.
The one replay up the seam, I can't remember who it was, watching Terrell Dodson try to drop into that space after 5 years of watching Tremaine Edmonds dropping into that space, and the speed at which he could do it was just heartbreaking to be. Oh God.
Yeah.
So all the and what happens is, and some of the names that are coming up here. So I get thrown Kyle Van Noy a lot, Christian Kirksey, even Zach Cunningham and Miles Jack when they signed. Obviously, Miles Jack retired. Zach Cunningham he's just a slightly better Dodson or Klein. Yes, does he look good coming up in a really smart, savvy 12-year veteran? Does he know how to shoot some gaps and how to find the spaces to stuff the run? Yes. Mm-hmm. Do you want him out in space covering Dalton Kincaid? No,
he's not the coverage backer you want.
You don't want that. We have those guys. We already have guys who can come forward and tackle and that would get isolated and roasted in coverage. We don't need more of those. So Anthony Barr, Kyle Van Noy, those are names that people recognize, and they have the letter LB next to them. So people conflate that into, he has to be better than what we have. And he's not.
That is not
Anyone who can actually cover in a modern defense is already on a roster, is not going to get cut, and will cost us something legitimate to get.
Very fair point. And yeah, it's not even to just tie it into Tremaine Edmonds or anything like that, but it's a hole that exists on the team that has not been filled since Edmonds departed, and hopefully that's a good one from Chris. Names people recognize from Madden 4 years ago. Absolutely, yeah, throw them all out there. And we'll see
I won't speak to. I know Adam's talked about Deion Jones. I really wanted Deion Jones 3 years ago. I haven't paid a ton of attention. I know then he went to Cleveland, and then he's gone a couple different places. I don't know how it's gone the last year or two. I can't speak.
He had a ton of tackles, but he's another dude who, if you were upset that Tremaine Edmonds made too many tackles downfield, then you're going to hate Deion Jones. Like, you're not going to like him at all. Like, it's, and again, maybe is he serviceable? Is he more? I would take him over Terrell Dodson.
Correct.
And
In our current situation, would he be a better pairing to compete with Terrell Bernard? Yes, he would.
Yeah, like I would take that, but I would also take. Oh, that's awesome, Ty. Thank you very much for being here for the super chat.
Appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so linebacker spot. We'll see what happens. It's one to watch. Yeah. Not great. Greg, last takeaway from this game before we dive into some things we'd like to see going forward.
I think if nothing else, the defensive line has solidified the fact that they're going to be good because they've been.
That's
good.
Also my third takeaway.
Yeah, they've been good without Von Miller. We don't even have Von Miller back yet. We haven't even played the starters for long stretches. We haven't even gotten the benefit. People complain about rotating defensive line like it's not a valid strategy that the Eagles and the Niners and everybody else uses the exact same way. We haven't even gotten the benefit of the waves where you get that bonus in the late third quarter and fourth quarter where your defensive line is more fresh than the offensive line, where it actually helps close games. We haven't even gotten that yet. We haven't even gotten Von Miller yet, and it's looked really nice. So I am very excited about what I think this defensive line is going to do. Somebody in the comments, I apologize, I didn't see who it was, made the comment of, oh, did we start Boogie Basham today as kind of a, hey, look, Boogie Basham is starting for the Buffalo Bills.
He's great.
Do you want to trade for our starting defensive end? Maybe, and that would be wonderful. But in full sincerity, the fact that Boogie Basham is probably our 6th or 7th best defensive end, counting Von Miller, like that, you can probably make an argument whether it's him or Kingsley Jonathan as our 6th or 7th best defensive end is actually awesome. Because guess what? Both you and I give Boogie Basham an incredibly hard time. It's not his fault that he's not Creed Humphrey. He did not cause that. He's better than every other team's 6th or 7th best defensive end.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, so yes, is he not what he was supposed to be? And do we hate on him a fair amount? Yeah. But is he better than every other team's 6th and 7th best defensive end? Yes. Would he make 25 other rosters in the NFL? Yes, I think he would. So I don't think there's any chance he's going to get cut, but there's a chance he's not a Buffalo Bill come Tuesday.
I would take it if he got some Daryl Johnson kind of action and got traded for a pick or a player or some kind of piece. Like, I'd take it. And
if we find out that Detroit happens to be a huge Boogie Basham fan,
right, and they want to trade us Amon-Ra St. Brown. No, I'm just kidding. I took it too far. Like
I teed you up for Malcolm Rodriguez and everything.
I know, but I don't want to go. I wanted to do the Amon-Ra St. Brown joke. I like him so much.
Do they have an extra right tackle? I don't know. Who's Penei Sewell's backup. I don't know.
I was going to say, we don't need the just trade Boogie for Sewell.
At one point, they actually had the exact same. They had the Kelvin Beachum. They had a guy who was a starter, and then they drafted Sewell, and it bumped them into a backup. Yes, but I think he went somewhere.
I would say they had a couple guys in free agency who left via free agency. Like, I think the backup to Jonah Jackson at guard, and then one of their backups.
Jermaine Ifedi is their swing tackle. Jermaine Ifedi's their swing tackle.
I would love to just get some kind of tackle reinforcement depth. Maybe we'll talk about that in a couple minutes here.
Detroit also has Bobby Hart.
Oh, I did not know that. That is very
I just learned that 6 seconds ago.
That is very funny. Man, I don't know. Well, we'll talk about tackle in a minute, I'm assuming, when we talk about our go forward. Not too much for me to have, but that was my third point as well. Like, I think every year for the last several years, the defensive line has received significant attention in the offseason, whether it's the draft or free agency or both. And I think this year, we got, Jordan Phillips comes back, Shaq Lawson comes back, they re-up Ed Oliver, and then the little tweaks here and there to the defensive line. I think Leonard Floyd coming in wasn't the hugest addition, but I really liked it. Between all the moves that they've made, I wanted to see reinforcement on the interior in the draft. They didn't. They brought in Poona Ford. I've been happy with the Poona Ford addition. This iteration of the Bills' defensive line is the most confident I've been in the Bills' defensive line, I think, since McDermott and Bean have spent significant resources on it every year, which is probably like the last 3 or 4 years, ever since that first Mario Addison year.
Even some like the fact that our 5th and 6th guys are Tim Settle and Eli Anko.
Yeah.
How much better has Tim Settle looked? Like, I know there was some talk about like, oh, he was playing through some injuries we didn't know about last year, and I always dismiss that stuff like, yeah, sure he was.
Yeah, I bet.
Now watching him, I was like, oh, all right. Maybe
He's-
maybe he was gutting through some stuff last year.
He's-
He's looked significantly better.
He when healthy and playing as like the 3 or the 4, like in the depth chart last year, he was solid, and he's shown quickness, he's shown flashes, he's shown burst, and I love Elianku. Like, I love what he does in the interior against the run. Healthy Jordan Phillips is a very good player for the Bills. The issue is he's just like never healthy. But I'm confident in this defensive line. I think the rotation looks good. I like how they're rushing the passer, but I also like how they're defending the run, and what Sean McDermott is doing from a play call standpoint in terms of run stunts and run blitzes paired with regular blitzes and simulateds and all that. I'm excited for what the D line can be. And we saw AJ Epinesa had a really great sack today. He had another pressure earlier in the game.
Yeah.
Yep, almost had 2. Kingsley Jonathan had a nice like long arm into a spin back underneath. Greg Rousseau continues to play strong. Like, I'm very confident in this defensive line, more so than I really have been in the Bean McDermott era. And yeah, I don't like Bookie Basham, but having him as your like edge 5 or 6, you know what? That's not bad.
Yeah,
now I'm still annoyed that we took him in the 2nd and he's edge 5 or 6, but that's a conversation for another point in time. Let's stay on the positive. Yeah, the defensive line looks good. We're excited about it. Now, Greg, as we start to hit our last segment here, what you want to see going forward. So is it one thing? Is it 2 things? What is on your mind in terms of going forward that you want to see this Buffalo Bills team do? Obviously, again, within realism. You're not going to be like, I want the Bills to get Fred Warner.
All they need to do is get Fred Warner and Lane Johnson, and everything's going to be fine.
Everything is swell.
I don't think we are going to see any material transactions. I don't. I think if we see any trades, it's going to be our players going out for future picks. What do I want to see? I want to see them acquire a starting caliber middle linebacker and starting caliber right tackle. I do not expect to see either of those things. I think there is a non-zero chance we see one. I think there's a chance that we do bring in a player to compete at one of those spots. I think the most likely for me is a Kelvin Beachum type who is an insurance policy for Spencer Brown, not a immediate starter. I don't expect there to be an immediate starter, even if we got Josh Jones, who I think played better than Brown last year and is also 25, and you could make a case should. I even don't think he would have stepped in and started ahead of Spencer Brown. I think he just would have been Spencer Brown would have had a quick hook. And we would have brought Brown in if he continued to struggle. So I'm even fine if it's that. So get me an upgrade for David Quessenberry and get me a reason that it's okay to cut Terrell Dotson. That would I don't expect a transaction for either to be there. So what do I want to see? I'd like to see both of those things. And the reason I focus on those and started more on a negative is that I think at every other spot on this roster, we're going to be pretty good. And we're going to have a really good team. And what I want to see going forward is full doses of the things I think we held back on. I don't think we saw the full aggression and exotic looks that McDermott's going to give in games. I don't think we saw the full usage of Deontay Hardy. I don't think we saw the full usage of Dalton Kincaid and everything he can be. I saw some sprinkles of screenplays that made me very excited. I'm very much, and what I want to see is full doses of those exciting things, because I think that's real and that's going to happen. If I get a sprinkle of a transaction to push at those 2 spots, that would be great, but I don't actually expect that. Similar
boat. In an ideal world, what I would love to see or would want to see going forward, and I feel just basing it like in reality is just kind of already makes me not even want to say it. But yeah, I want tackle depth. Preferably, I'd like a right tackle starter acquired, or somebody gets like cut. That's amazing. Like when the Panthers cut Steve Smith and the Ravens were like, cool, we'll take him. This always makes me think back to Daniel Tosh had a point in his stand-up like years and years ago where he was like, I waste my time thinking about so many stupid things. Like, I wonder, like, how come nobody drives up to me with a Ferrari and is like, hey man, I don't want this car. Do you want it? And then just like gives me the keys. That's what I feel like I'm at right now. Like I want somebody to cut like their starting right tackle and to be like, oh sweet, the Bills can get him. Like I would love depth and stability or stability at right tackle, middle linebacker. Like you said though, like I just think it's a long shot of getting that. At most, you're going to get somebody like these XFL guys who have been coming in. You're going to get more of these guys that are like filling out the roster and just depth, but you're still going to have questions about like, I don't see any move happening either in a trade or somebody being cut and brought in that is going to make us feel, you know what, right tackle is shored up now. And so is middle linebacker. We're good to go. I don't think that's going to happen. So from a realistic standpoint, my number one thing I would like to see, Terrell Bernard at the other starting linebacker spot. That is my first hope because I think it's the most realistic. Like I would love for someone to be brought in to supplant him and solidify that spot. I would love for Malcolm Rodriguez, or I'd even take Alex Anzalone. Like bring him on in, like give me somebody.
Full agree, no notes.
Right there. Nice. I like that. It's just those moves I don't think are realistic, but you've already got this guy on the roster in Terrell Bernard. We talked about his pros and cons earlier and why he's kind of the least of all evils when it comes to that starting spot. So give me Terrell Bernard at middle linebacker. That's what I would like to see, even though, again, he's not the best archetype fit or frame fit. I just think he's the least of all evils, giving all things that have to be considered holistically. I would also, I guess, kind of put this up there with not necessarily realistic when it comes to the tackle middle linebacker spot. I wish there was some kind of move at backup quarterback that the Bills could have made. I wish that, like, Mariota was like a free agent and like a Mariota level quarterback was just like sitting around chilling out there. Like I'd love to have, and I don't think anybody ever feels confident in their QB2 situation, but I felt marginally, even to significantly better with Case Keenum as QB2 last year than I do with Kyle Allen as QB2 this year, or if it's Matt Barkley. But again, nobody ever feels great with their guy as their backup quarterback. I would like to feel a little better, but also on the other side is if Josh Allen goes down, it doesn't really matter who QB2 is because the Bills are screwed anyway. So there's also that other part of the conversation.
I've done that rant a bunch of times, so I won't regurgitate it here. The amount of money that Sam Darnold, Marcus Mariota, Jacoby Brissett, Tyrod Taylor are being paid would have meant you would have had to you don't choose those guys instead of Kyle Allen. You choose Kyle Allen and Leonard Floyd instead of those guys. So if anybody here wants to tell me that they would rather have Tyrod Taylor, Jacoby Brissett, Sam Darnold, Marcus Mariota instead of Kyle Allen and Leonard Floyd, I'll listen. I'll tell you you're a nincompoop, but I'll listen. Because of course we would, yes, in a vacuum, would I rather have the better player and not spend any money? Yeah, I would. But in case anybody didn't watch the Falcons play last year, if we get to a playoff game and Patrick Mahomes looks across the field and goes, oh my God, I can't believe they have Marcus Mariota, ain't gonna make any difference.
I'm changing the offense and I'm running triple option all day, baby.
You know, like it's just one of those things where I think we tell ourselves a lot of things about backup quarterbacks, and we tell us some tales about teams that is actually the rest of the roster carrying the quarterback, and there wasn't any difference between Jeff Hostetler and Phil Simms, and there wasn't any difference between Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. The rest of the roster was the reason those teams were in that spot, and they just happened to have a quarterback starter and backup who were about the same. And when that guy went out, it didn't change anything because the quarterback already wasn't the reason they were in that spot.
That makes me feel a little better, but it's still always like I always forget that when thinking about the first Super Bowl loss to the Giants. Then I'm always like, oh, and they lost to a backup quarterback. Like, God.
No, they lost to Lawrence Taylor and all the, Mark
and Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells
and
a tremendous game plan. And field goals are stupid. I don't know why they should ever.
I don't know why we have people who kick. So anyway, I will say the fact that we kicked the tires on Trey Lance and probably would have booted Kyle Allen to have Trey Lance as our project also means I'm not vouching for Kyle Allen because he's not good. No. And we probably have one of the bottom third backup quarterbacks in the league. But guess what? Guess who's with us in that bottom third?
The other top teams in the
Blaine Gabbert in Kansas City and Trevor Siemian in Cincinnati. And, it's just there's the only teams that have Jacoby Brissett are the ones who are starting Sam Howell. The There's a reason, and that Taylor Heineke is in Atlanta because they got Desmond Ridder, and that the reason that the Giants paid Tyrod Taylor is because Daniel Jones still isn't that good. But
Fair point. Or even with Carolina, like Andy Dalton to be in the room to help Bryce Young develop.
That's why they do those things.
Guy.
Why Case Keenum went back to Houston. All those different things. Why they brought Sam Darnold out to San Francisco, because it's still a 7th round pick in Brock Purdy. Those are the teams that spend money and give up a rotational, valuable player instead. Now, Adam's on fire today. You want to tell me we could go get Malik Willis? Absolutely. Absolutely. I would do that in a heartbeat. And all those things are reasons that next year, I actually think we need to be very serious about drafting a quarterback. All the things we discussed here is, if the cost control is the issue, well then shoot, let's we've been so good using 3rd round picks, we probably shouldn't use one on a quarterback, because we might miss out on taking another special teams linebacker, and that would be terrible.
That's low blow.
Our day 2 pick hit rate is just too high. We can't possibly take a quarterback. But next year you will hear me advocating that now financially we are in the position that we need to be taking swings there, because it is the prudent financial decision to lock in a developmental guy. And if, God forbid, you stumble into a Jimmy Garoppolo situation, then great. We'll flip him later for a better pick.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Like, I would like to solidify that spot and not have to just – it seems like we're just bringing in, like, dudes who are, like, friends with Josh Allen. And he's like, just bring in this guy. I like him. This
year, it's really hard to make the argument that that's not what took place this year.
Kind of really seems like, but again, to your point, like, if
they're also cheap, and that,
yes, absolutely, they work financially.
If you're gonna be bad, at least be cheap.
That's it. Like, and it makes your quarterback happy, and you're cheap. And again, to the overall bigger point, like, I don't know who the best backup quarterback in the league is, but if Josh Allen goes down, I don't think the best backup quarterback in the league is.
I use Jacoby Brissett. I think there's a good argument that Jacoby Brissett is the best backup quarterback in the NFL.
Maybe Bridgewater.
Yeah, sure. Either one of those. And then I use the Patrick Mahomes playoff situation. If Josh Allen gets hurt in a game and it's finishing the game against the Commanders or the Cardinals or the Texans, well, guess what? Kyle Allen could probably finish that game too, and the rest of the roster can carry us to a win. If it gets hurt and it's a game against the Bengals or the Eagles or the Chiefs, having Jacoby Brissett ain't going to matter. Guess who we play in the playoffs? Other good teams. This team goes as far as Josh Allen goes. End of story, period.
Yeah.
I get it that some people say, yeah, but what if it's the 1-win difference between having home field advantage or having a higher seed in the playoffs? Sure. Guess what? If we have Josh Allen, I don't care where we play. We got a shot in the playoffs.
Fair point.
If we don't have Josh Allen, I don't care where we play. We don't have a shot in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I spent 17 years telling myself the rest of the roster can carry a team to blah, blah, blah. No, they can't. No, they can't. We have Josh Allen. All things are possible. If we don't, it doesn't matter. I'm not spending an extra $1.
You have to – I think it's still possible to have, like, average QB play and win a championship, but you have to be so loaded everywhere else. You've got to have, like, an amazing offensive line, an amazing defensive line, probably like an all-pro corner, a couple other all-pro something else. Like, you just have to be this loaded squad.
San Francisco's a pretty reasonable case study where it's all the rest of the roster and the ultimate avatar play caller. I think in today's NFL, you need both.
Yes, and that's it. You need so many other
things. I don't think Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin's a great coach. Pittsburgh has a great rest of the roster. I don't think Pittsburgh could do it because they don't have that play caller.
Agreed. You have to have all those.
I think you have to have both.
Yep,
all the other things.
Yep, everything to mitigate the not having that top tier level QB.
Yeah,
and it's hard to have all those things and have them click at the right time.
Yeah,
very fair point. I mean, I'm in alignment and agreement with you.
And Doug Peterson was that guy for that Eagles team.
Yeah, sparked them, and they had a good squad and things like a line.
They're one of the best defensive lines in history.
They also, I don't want to say lucked out, but like. The New Orleans Saints were like nasty, and they lost to the Vikings because of that. Like Williams not making the play on Diggs, and Diggs houses it. Like that Saints team, for me, houses Philadelphia. It's going to end up being it, but conversation for another time. Like, and they still beat the Pats. They had a great game plan. They also, a lot of like other good.
The rest of the roster was awesome.
Yeah, They had a lot of things that helped Nick Foles. Man. Ooh.
Yeah. Who also was just as good as their starter.
The drop for Carson Wentz was going to be the MVP that year. I had him in fantasy. Like, he was going to be the MVP. His drop from like, oh man, this guy's an MVP level quarterback, to wearing 3 different teams' gear in a workout shot.
I would use it similar to statistical runs and short windows we've seen for Ryan Tannehill, that we've seen for Jimmy Garoppolo, that we've seen when you have a stacked roster and you're on a hot streak as a play caller. A lot of quarterbacks can look awesome for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I like this comment too from Sean. Go back and look at that Saints team with Brees. He got screwed in a few years. They could have won it all. Yeah, I think of the Nickel Roby non-interference against the Rams. And then, of course, and then that bothered me even more because of like the Rams were so wounded with Gurley's like knees being awful. And I was like, oh, of course, they're going to limp into the Super Bowl against the Patriots. And then what happened? The Patriots dog walked them for that entire boring, awful Super Bowl.
Worst Super Bowl ever.
God, I still hate Tom Brady and the stupid Patriots. I don't even know how we got
so much in his stupid face.
Everything always comes back to this. Want to shout out as we wind down here. Want to shout out the sponsor. I mention them at different points depending on where the show is. Again, like I say it every episode, and it's not just me saying it because of the sponsor. The best pizza in Buffalo, New York. One Pie Pizza. Online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms you're listening to this show on. Cup of char pepperoni, a fantastic sweet sauce pie, great cheese to sauce ratio. They make their own homemade blue cheese, and it's tremendous. And another thing I mention every time too, like when you get different veggies, they chop them all up evenly and then sprinkle them evenly across the whole pizza. So it's not just like, oh yeah, I want peppers and onions, and you got like one piece that has a huge chunk of onion on it, and then there's nothing else, and it sucks, and you bite into it and it's awful. They're good people. They make a quality product, and they do a lot for the community and the city of Buffalo, whether it's partnering with Roswell or the SPCA or Alzheimer's Foundation or Toys for Tots. They do a lot of good. So do your taste buds some good and do the city and the community some good. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Greg, I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks, because we're going to wind down here. Any closing or parting thoughts from you when it comes to this game, the preseason, the go forward, anything that is on your mind? The floor is yours.
Preseason's done.
I say end of episode.
God.
Yeah.
Thank God. Preseason's done. Real football is here. Everything that we watch from here forward actually matters. And it's going to be great because guess what? The Buffalo Bills have a great football team. If you're still listening right now, you root for one of the best football teams in the NFL. You are rooting for a team with one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the NFL. You are rooting for a team with one of the top 3 Super Bowl odds in the NFL. You are rooting for a team that is favored to win the best division in football. Enjoy it. Soak it all in. Have fun. We're probably not going to go undefeated, but we're still going to be pretty good. We're going to win double-digit games. We're probably going to win the division. We're going to win some playoff games, and we might win a Super Bowl. And you get to enjoy that for the next 20 weeks of your life, and it's going to be great. Soak it all in. Enjoy it. Savor every minute because it's a lot of fun. If you're here, again, the modern way, if you want to go to the grocery store or at the oil change place or at the department store and tell people, like, oh, you're wearing a Bill shirt. Do you listen to Cover One? Because you should. They're a ton of fun. That would be great. But nowadays, all you need to do, the modern version of word of mouth, is pressing the like button. If you thought I was an idiot today and you want to tell me the stupid things that I said, write us a comment in the comments of the show. Yeah. Point out every single thing that I said that was dumb and let me know how dumb I was. It's really important to share that. That's the best way to do it. So give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review. That's the modern way to do this. Go in and press the button. That's how you tell the algorithm that you enjoyed what you watched and you think other people should check it out too.
I don't have anything to add to that. Greg, just in case people don't know who you are or what you do, tell them where they can find you on Twitter and your shows and anything and everything about you.
Anyone who has the chance, you can come tolerate me on Twitter at Greg Tompsett. You can also see me every Wednesday night with Aaron Quinn on the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Looking forward to have some fun. We will be opening up here, going through some kind of overall thoughts this week and next week, getting into our game preview mode with Connor Rogers previewing the Jets because that's the next thing that's up.
Oh, man, it's great. I feel like I was just doing the film room with Eric, breaking down how the Bills lost to the Bengals, and then I felt like we were in Mobile, and I feel like I blinked, and it's regular season football time. it came absolutely out of nowhere, and it's been fun. That's funny from Scott. Yeah, we're all super angry about the quality of the middle linebacker situation, and that the Bills will ultimately go 14-3. Yeah, it's possible. Oh man, what a season! I'm excited for it, and again, I can't believe it's already like around the corner. I feel like we were just talking Senior Bowl and NFL draft, and here we are at the regular season. Like Greg said, if you haven't already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. It goes a long way towards helping the entire channel and team, not just the show, but it helps the brand as a whole to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Like Greg said, it's all about that algorithm. So the likes help to propel this episode and the channel to front pages in front of more eyes and ears. So if you enjoyed this content, please and thank you, drop a like on this video. If you are listening on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that is cool too. Please rate and review and subscribe on whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. Drop a subscription to Disguise Coverage and to the Cover One channel as a whole on YouTube. We have you covered literally 6 days of the week with live shows and content, and that's not even including any of the additional videos and snippets and extra content that we upload throughout the weeks, especially come regular season time when there's a bunch of content to be had and to be produced. We appreciate you folks for tuning in to this episode. If you joined us live, thank you very much for riding with us live here on this episode. Your questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, the back and forth with one another. Thank you very much to Carl for your super chat. Thank you very much to Eb Tide for your super chat as well. If you didn't watch live, thank you very much for your post-live view or listen, whichever have you. We appreciate you folks. Thank you very much to Mr. Greg Tompsett for riding with me here on this post-game edition of Disguise Coverage. Greg, I appreciate you. And everybody watching, listening, we appreciate you folks more than you will ever possibly know. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you this upcoming Tuesday, August 29th, live 9 p.m. Eastern for a regularly scheduled in-season edition of Disguise Coverage, as will be the tradition going forward for the rest of the season. So this Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern for the regularly scheduled episodes of Disguise Coverage. You can also see me live Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern for the Cover One Film Room with Eric Turner, and then Greg and Aaron live every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, the Cover One Buffalo Show. And that'll do it for us here. For myself, Anthony Prohaska, for my guest on this episode, Greg Tompsett. This has been another episode of Disguised Coverage. Godspeed, and as always, go Bills.